What's up, everybody? It's Charles. Today it is finally time to put the rear sway bar, anti-sway bar, roll bar, anti-roll bar, whatever you want to call it, on the R32. Now the car's already been lowered and has the appropriate shock absorbers to match the lowering springs. So now we're on to our next step, adding a rear sway bar, or I should say really upgrading the rear sway bar. This is an adjustable rear sway bar from H&R. This one has two different positions we can adjust to. We're gonna start with setting it on the lower setting and then we'll move it up as needed. What's the point of upgrading this component? The biggest reason really is to reduce the amount of understeer in the vehicle. This, even though it's an all-wheel drive car, it behaves more like a front-wheel drive car, especially because we're not putting any power to the rear wheels until there's front wheel spin or slip. Front wheel drive cars naturally have more understeer, which means you have to turn the wheel more to get the desired result. So upgrading the rear sway bar should reduce the amount of understeer and help her get around corners a little bit faster. Now the car does great already and it drives wonderful, but I think this is going to be just one of those little tiny tweaks to get it even better. And the rear sway bar was like 250 bucks, so in the suspension modifying world, that's pretty cheap. We're also going to be replacing the sway bar end links and a couple of pieces of hardware. Here are our new sway bar end links. Those are OEM end links. We got a couple of bits of new hardware, nuts and bolts. There's our pretty purple sway bar. And these are some of the tools we're going to be using today. This can be done with basic hand tools. Also, big ups to Craftsman for providing some tools and for partnering with me on this video. Be sure to watch all the way to the end because I'll be giving away one of these Craftsman toolbox, a bunch of Craftsman hand tools, and this bad boy right here. First thing you're gonna need to do is get your car up in the air, at least the back end anyway. Remember, proper lifting techniques, be sure to use jack stands, and if you take the wheels off, slide them under the car. That way if the jack and the jack stand fail, you got a third layer of protection. And keep in mind the exhaust may be hot, so you might wanna put some gloves on. Let's start by taking the very front rubber hanger off. Then we'll move to take the exhaust clamp off. Now I actually like to leave the clamp here until we have the rest of the exhaust loose. That way it doesn't come crashing down. Before I go any further, I'm gonna actually wrap up the exhaust tips. I don't want this to accidentally hit the ground and scratch them up. I'll just throw a rag over them and a piece of tape. Doesn't have to be pretty, just enough to keep them from getting scratched. Do the same thing on the other side. All right, let's keep working forward. We'll get the next exhaust hanger off. Now this may be the point where I actually want to support the front of the exhaust. That way it doesn't accidentally slip out and fall. Either way, you want to stay out from underneath it because you don't want to get bonked on the head. I found that the box that the Craftsman toolbox came in actually fits perfect under here, so we're going to use that to support the exhaust while we take the rest of the hardware off. On the about 4% chance that you still have your exhaust flap hooked up, we need to disconnect the vacuum line. Mine's plugged, but it still has the line there. We'll take the left exhaust hanger off, and we'll go ahead and take the right side off. And now that the exhaust is loose and hanging down awkwardly, we can just go ahead and slide it right on out. Next, we're gonna have to unbolt the exhaust hanger so we can get the heat shield down. That's 4 13mm bolts. We're almost to our sway bar. We actually have 4 exhaust heat shield hangers that we have to remove. These can be kind of a pain in the butt. In fact, these are one of those parts that sometimes it's better just to get new ones and cut the old ones off. But if you don't want to get new ones, let me show you how to remove them. Sometimes you can take a flat blade screwdriver and just put it in one of the channels and twist it out. Other times you actually have to bend the tabs out a little bit in order to get it to turn. It's gonna really depend on how long it's been in there. When they come out nice, you can generally just twist them out. As you can see, this one got a little bit unhappy on us. Let's see if the other ones wanna play a little bit nicer. There we go. That's what's supposed to happen. Break it loose with a screwdriver and then twist it out just like this. You can use a trim removal tool, but that usually destroys these. But if they're gonna get destroyed anyway, I guess it doesn't really matter. So we have 2 towards the front of the heat shield right behind the differential, and we have 2 at the very back. The ones at the back here actually have little retainers to keep them captive with the heat shields. So you might have to bend these tabs out a little bit. Lucky for us, there is only 4 of these things. And the last one, yay. All of our exhaust heat shield fasteners have been removed. Let's go ahead and pull the heat shield down. You want to be pretty careful with this. We don't want to mangle it up. So we'll just kind of nurse it down. There's that out of the way. Now we can see our tiny, puny, little, itty bitty sway bar that we're gonna replace. Go ahead and start by undoing our sway bar end links. Start with this big 21 that goes through the shock absorber first. Now you might be able to spin this off just with a 16mm socket and an impact, but if you find that it's spinning, take an open end box wrench, slide it up onto the fitting, and then it should come right out. And of course, we'll do the same thing for the other side. Next, we need to remove the brackets that hold our sway bar onto the subframe. That is just two 13mm bolts. There's also this little bracket on here. We want to pay attention to it and make sure this doesn't get gone on us. These are pretty short little bolts that look like they actually have some thread locker on it, so we'll go ahead and put some back on when we get it back together. For the top bolt on the passenger side, be careful of these evap hoses. We don't want to split one or anything like that, cause a check engine light. All right, and we will go ahead and take off our final bracket. This one we have a little bit more room. Probably not a bad idea to hold your sway bar up while you take this last bolt out. As you can see, that is our new sway bar. For comparison, here's our old sway bar. Look at the size difference between the one we took off and the one that we're installing. In fact, let's measure the difference. We'll start with the one we took off the car. So the diameter in the center, 15.21 millimeters, and the upgraded one, 21.21 millimeters. So 6 millimeters difference between the new upgraded one and the one we took off. Based on that alone, this should be a pretty darn good upgrade for the car. Now, if you want to get new brackets for your sway bar, that's cool with me, but we're just going to reuse these. Go ahead and remove them. Here's our bracket. I'll just wipe that out. We'll go ahead and take the other one off. If you're gonna paint these or modify them in any way, now is the time. We're just gonna go ahead and put these right back on the way they came. We don't need to lubricate the bushing of the new sway bar at all. H&R has some pre-lubricated bushing that they have installed, so we don't need to lubricate it. We just need to take our bracket and install it like that. Do the same thing for the other side. We'll go ahead and put a little bit of blue thread locker on these bolts. Let's go ahead and get our super race car sway bar installed. We'll go ahead and get one side started, then we'll do the other side. Well, next we'll do the bottom bolt with the bracket. Make sure the little tab is facing out. That's what attaches our exhaust heat shield. Let's snug our bolts down. I'm gonna go ahead and snug both sides down, and then we'll come back and torque them. The torque spec on these is 15 Newton meters. All right, next up, let's install our new sway bar end link and hardware. These are OEM end links. This is what H&R recommend to use for the suspension setup that I have. Also, a new nut that attaches to the end link. Notice the hole is kind of oblong. That's a locking nut. And of course, the big old bolt that we took out of the shock absorber. I'm gonna take the end link. I'm gonna put the bolt in it. I'm gonna put it through the shock absorber. You're gonna have to lift up on the tire a little bit or lower the car down a little bit to raise it to line it up. Once you have that started, now we can put the end link in the sway bar. Start our locking nut. We'll go ahead and snug this bolt down and come back and torque it later. All right, there we go. Let's do the other side. Get rid of our old bolt. Take the end link. I'll install the new bolt. Make sure that the stud is facing towards the inside of the car. I'm gonna start it in the sway bar first, get the nut on and leave it loose. We'll go ahead and line everything up and install the bolt. The second side, it might be a little bit more challenging than the first side because you don't have the movement of the sway bar to allow you to shift everything around. Now that we got the top and the bottom in, let's go ahead and snug our bolts down and our top one. The lower bolt, the big boy, gets torqued to 110 Newton meters. Let's go ahead and mark it. Do the same thing for the other side. Mark it. The smaller one that attaches to the sway bar itself is going to be 25 Newton meters. We'll go ahead and mark that. I do this for two reasons. One, to confirm that I torqued it down properly. And two, if the bolt ever moves or loosens, I can see that at a quick glance. We'll go ahead and paint the bolts for the sway bar bracket as well up here. Now that our fresh sway bar is all freshly installed, let's go ahead and get everything else put back together, starting with our exhaust heat shield. Remember how much I don't like these little clips? Well, they're actually pretty easy to install. All I do is I take the clip, I take a socket on an extension and I just push them up onto the stud. Set it on and push it on just like that. Do the same thing for all of them. Get it started and just push it on. Don't forget to bend our tabs on the retainers back down. And our final one. Next, let's put our exhaust hanger brackets back up. Next up, we got to get our exhaust back on. Sometimes you have to get creative with big and heavy things like this when you're by yourself. So I set it on my rolly chair. We're going to roll it into place. Then we'll go ahead and get it installed. All right, so we sort of got it in place. I got one hanger on right here. Let's put the other hanger on back here. If you're one of the 4 people that still has the flapper connected, connect your flapper vacuum line. And the final piece to our puzzle, our exhaust clamp. Make sure these are the proper German torque spec of good and tight, or if you really want to put a torque wrench on them, torque spec is 40 Newton meters. Just got back from driving the car. It drives fantastic. One of the things I love about this kind of modification is it doesn't change the way the car performs all the time. Like if you were to do some other suspension components, it may stiffen up the car way more than you really want on your day-to-day driving. Normal driving, you don't even notice that you made any changes to the vehicle. I think the real big test though is going to be a high performance situation such as an autocross or a track day. All right, that's all wrapped up. Let's get over to the giveaway and hook one of you guys up with some free tools. For the Craftsman tool giveaway, this is basically what you guys are gonna get. This is a 47-piece mobile mechanic tool set in a storage case. We have an 11-piece 3/8 drive socket set and the 11-piece long wrench set. These are the gunmetal ones, which are pretty cool. In addition to that, you're gonna get hooked up with the toolbox itself. This is the 2000 series 41-inch 6-drawer mobile workbench, which is what I've been using to do this entire job with. Here's how we're gonna play. Like the video, give it a share, make sure you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, then drop a comment down below and let me know what your Craftsman tool story is. Mine's pretty simple. I started out with almost all Craftsman tools when I got my very first job at the dealership. I'll pick one person at random in the US. Craftsman's gonna send you guys all this stuff right here, which is pretty rad. In addition to that, I'm gonna hook somebody up with this exact wrench that I had custom engraved at a Craftsman event with Humble Mechanic on it. So if you don't get the toolbox, you got a chance of getting this guy right here, and odds are I'll probably throw some extra in there for you too. You can check out all the full details of this down in the description, and when that person gets picked at random, I'll pin your comment to the top of the comments so you know you won. All right, so big ups to Craftsman for hooking you guys up with some rad tools. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll talk to you again next time.